Online Pro is back with Mock Draft 2.0 of the 2025 NFL Draft, and I'm excited. I'm excited to go over this again. Obviously, went over it for the first time, did a first go at it with the mock draft. I really wasn't sure how it was going to go. I thought my picks were pretty good. Obviously, there's been more that has come out recently in the news throughout everything that has changed some of the way I have some of these picks going for the start. But at number one, I'm still pretty confident that Tennessee will take, let's get this started here, that Tennessee will take Cam Ward. Now, right now what they're doing is they're saying that they're going to get Abdul Carter. That's been like a big conversation that's being had right now. I think that's all a pawn in the system. That's a ploy. And the reason a team would do that at number one is potentially, I think they're maybe thinking that Cam Ward isn't, like, it's not that good of a quarterback draft, but they're just a team that desperately needs a quarterback. So if they're going to get a draft, like a trade offer of something like ridiculous where it's like 2 first-round picks and a player, they would definitely take that. I just don't think teams at this point are willing to do that. So that's why they're saying other ways. But you look at it, you look at Callahan, the head coach of the Tennessee Titans. If he doesn't deliver this year and at least look promising and at least win 7 to 8 games for the Tennessee Titans in that division, he's out. He's going to be easily be out as the head coach. That has to be something that's understood. So they're going to go Cam Ward. Number two, though, I have a big change from last time. I have a trade. I have a trade going on at number two. We're going to take Cleveland, second overall pick, and we're going to take the Giants. And I think this will happen. The Giants have expressed a lot of interest. Let's just say it'll be like a second and a fourth. I think that would make the most sense. And the Giants, with this pick, then are going to take Shedeur Sanders. And a big reason that I think this is the case is because you've been seeing a lot of things that have been linking Shedeur Sanders with New York, with the Giants. And I think just they're going to want a quarterback. Dable apparently likes Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders, as a prospect, does some things that starting NFL quarterbacks tend to do. Like, he's able to throw a pretty good ball in the pocket. He's a pretty athletic guy, not a super athletic quarterback, but he's got decent athleticism. But I think the way that you look at it, if you're the Giants and Brian Dable, they're also in a position where you have this star receiver, Malik Neighbors, at this point. You have things in your favor. You need a quarterback. It's not going to cost them that much to move up one with Cleveland, and I think they're going to be able to get that done. That's a win-win for both teams. And then if you're the Browns at this third pick, you need a skill guy. You need they need a whole bunch of things. They need a quarterback. I think they will go quarterback eventually, but I think it's in the second round, whether it's a Jalen Milroe, whether it's a Will Howard, Kyle McCord. There's a lot of options out there as you go further into the rounds. But I think they're going to go with Travis Hunter. I believe they're going to take Travis Hunter. And I saw a mock draft. I believe it was Daniel Jeremiah's who's been doing it for years on years. I believe it was his first mock draft that he did. And he agreed. He said he was in the minority that said that Travis Hunter will be used ideally as an offensive weapon. And I agree. I agree for this reason if he goes to Cleveland. Cleveland needs another offensive guy. And from what I've seen of Travis Hunter, from what I've watched, he has really good ball skills. He's very talented on the offensive end. He had over 1,000 yards receiving the final year. He's a really good red zone target. I think that you could use him primarily offensively, and I think that would work well. Obviously, you put him in on defensive packages. Maybe if they're going secondary heavy in situations like that, I would put him in there. I would play him both ways for sure. I wouldn't have him play every play of the game, obviously. But if you had to go to one position where he would primarily shine, I would have to say at that point that I would want him on the offensive end. And I'm in the minority with that, but that's the way I think. In Cleveland, they need a weapon. They need a burst. I think this is the proper burst at 3. And you're getting picks back from the Giants in this hypothetical. So it's a good win for you. Next up, though, I think New England, a lot of people have Will Campbell of LSU, who is going to be a really good tackle. They have him going there. They say they need offensive line help. From what I've seen, from what I've been hearing, Abdul Carter is going to be too good of a prospect to pass on. If he's here in this position, you're not going to pass on getting Abdul Carter in this spot because from what I'm hearing, and obviously there's been no combine yet, anything, people are really high on this guy. A lot of people have this guy as the most talented in the draft. If he has the potential to be a generational guy, I believe Mike Vrabel will draft Abdul Carter in this spot. You cannot go wrong with getting a generational edge guy. Like look at what Myles Garrett has done. Look at what T.J. Watt has done for the Steelers. It's a huge position, really a position that I think is even so a little underrated. It's a huge position in the NFL if you can get it right, and if you can have a elite guy. You could look at Mason Crosby, or you could look at Crosby for the Raiders. It's a huge, huge position. Max Crosby. I don't know why I was calling him Mason Crosby, but I think that they go Abdul Carter here. Next to Jacksonville, it really looks like they want to improve that secondary, and you can't go wrong with Will Johnson here. Was a really, really solid player for that Michigan defense. Didn't play the last couple games, but I think as far as cornerback, this is an incredible prospect. I think that he's going to be really good in the NFL. And Jacksonville is another team. They just kind of need all sorts of things, and can't really go wrong with Will Johnson. Next up, going to the Raiders here, and I think there's a lot of different ways you can go. I see McMillan's here. A lot of people are very high on McMillan, but I think the Raiders have a bit more issues than that to diagnose. And obviously, they have Max Crosby on the defensive side. Outside of that, they don't have a lot of pieces. And I think that if they're smart here in this position, you also have to factor that Pete Carroll was most recently hired as their head coach. I think that he's going to go after a guy like Mason Graham. It just would make sense with Pete Carroll coming in that he would get a defensive guy right off the bat in the first round. I see a way where they could trade this pick. I see a world where if somehow, some way, a Shedeur Sanders or a Cam Ward slides down to this position, I see a way where they could draft them here. But for now, considering Pete Carroll's there, I like Mason Graham to go. Going to the Jets, I know they went O-line last year, but they had to really had to rebuild that O-line. And I think Will Campbell's the right choice because they can find if they have Aaron Rodgers next year, which I think we'll know very soon if they are going to or going to not to. You need to protect the heck out of him, and that's why you would go with Will Campbell here. Carolina is interesting, and I think this would be a really solid if this is able to happen, and I think there's possibilities where it can. If McMillan can just fall to you here at 8, all of a sudden you help out Bryce Young even more, and I know a lot of people are saying O-line to help him out even more, but if you look at it, now he's going to have validated weapons. Leggett, who they got last year, he had actually a really solid year for him. People are saying T-Mac, this McMillan guy. I've seen a lot of his tape, but I haven't seen anything that suggests to me that he's going to be like some sort of generational great prospect. Like, I don't think he's in a similar class at all as like a Malik Neighbors or even a Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't think it's a class like that. But people are super high on this guy, and I think that he can carve out a really good career in the NFL. So it's a good pick to get him at 8. If you're looking at New Orleans, they need all kinds of things. I think that they will go with Mikael Williams, though. If you look at it, they're looking to upgrade on defense is what I've seen. And obviously, we don't know who their head coach is yet at this point. All signs point to it being Kellen Moore. So from that perspective, you would think maybe he would go offense. But I think that if he's there, if Williams is there at this point, I think somebody's going to go up and get him. Then you go to Chicago Bear, and Ben Johnson has already vocally made it clear that they want to get a lineman to help protect Caleb Williams. So this will be Kelvin Banks here. It just makes sense from all perspective that they would go O-line. Last year they had the opportunity to go O-line. Instead, drafted Rome Odunze, although that's a good piece, and I think he's going to carve out. I think he's going to have a great sophomore season, Rome Odunze. But they would have benefited more from getting an offensive tackle last year outside of that pick, and I think they correct that this year and they go O-line. If it's not Banks, I think it's somebody else. But I think they have a solid defense. They have a solid defense, and now that you've hired an offensive coach, obviously their O-line just wasn't good enough. They're going O-line here or trading it down, probably no matter what. San Francisco, this looks like a James Pierce Jr. pick. Really solid player at Tennessee. Had a lot of great games, a lot of great plays, hard hitter. It just looks like a guy that would smooth right in to San Francisco. And San Francisco just needs to stay healthy. Them having a pick this early is pretty dangerous because they essentially were injured all year. They just need to stay healthy. So I like James Pierce Jr. going right here. Moving on to the Cowboys, and you can go all sort of directions here. But knowing the state of that team right now, knowing where Jerry Jones is, knowing that their running back class is just terrible who they have in the organization, I think that they are going to draft Ashton Jeanty. Now, this might be a hot take for some, but if I'm a GM in the NFL, I'm probably not taking him till at least pick 25 and over. And the big reason for that is his size. It's not about his ability. It's about his size. He's only 5'8". He is a really solid runner. There's moments where it looks like he runs like Barry Sanders. He's a really solid player. But the thing that scares me is his height at 5'8". That is very small. And you have to understand the workload that he's going to get in the league. Running backs get hit the most. They do. They get hit the most. It's more consistent. Their careers don't last that long. And if you're smaller like that, you have a smaller frame, you can get injured very easily, and that could lead to disaster. So it wouldn't be the reason I wouldn't take him. And realistically, I probably wouldn't take him to the beginning of the second round. I still think it would be a steal, but size is definitely a factor with that because 5'8" is just the risk of injury is so high, unfortunately. But I still think he's going to have a couple great years, but there's going to be injury risk. I can already see it. But I think Dallas will pick him here. Now, Miami, you got Malachi Starks sitting right there. They're going to take him. Need to upgrade on defense a little bit. Can't go wrong with a Georgia defender. Malachi Starks had a pretty solid year, had some good games. Now you go to the Colts, and I think the heavy pick here for a lot of people is saying Tyler Warren. And I think they need a lot more than this. I really do. I think that there's a lot of other areas that they need at this point. And I just think that if you're there, I think you go Jalen Walker here. I don't think another tight end is going to necessarily help this team at this point. I think you got to go defense. I would take Walker. Atlanta is interesting here, but I think we get another Michigan guy here, Kenneth Grant, who obviously was a big part of that national championship team that Michigan had a year back. And I think that he's in a position where he could really benefit this Atlanta team, a defense that is really going to look to get even better. Obviously, they have Judon, who had a solid year, but they let up a lot of points, and they need to improve defensively, and I think that's what they'll do. Arizona, they've been known to take Ohio State tackles before. Obviously, 2 years ago, they took the Ohio State tackle, Paris Johnson Jr. I think they go with Josh Simmons, and we really haven't seen a lot of Josh Simmons stuff because he only played 5.5 games for OSU. Obviously got injured in that Week 7 game that he played for the Buckeyes against Oregon, but he was having a heck of a killer year, and I thought he was playing really well at that point. But obviously, he was injured. I think that they just got to continue to build the foundation. If Kyler Murray is to still be their quarterback, got to build the foundation for him. Got to keep it. That's why I think they go with Simmons here from the national championship Buckeyes. Going on to Cincinnati, and this is best available defensive guy, no matter what. No matter what for the Cincinnati Bengals, it's best available defensive guy in this spot. Hands down, no question, don't even really need to talk about it. Seattle, this is interesting with Seattle, where you go in this spot. I think that if you're looking at everything, where they're at, I think they would want to go defense. Stewart from A&M. You can't go wrong with getting a good edge. And I just look at the other offensive positions, and you see there's a lot of offensive guys here. They don't really need that outside of quarterback right now. So I'd go with Stewart. Tampa Bay is interesting, where they also have a lot of offensive pieces at this point, but it could not hurt to get another receiver, a replacement for Chris Godwin or Mike Evans, who are both getting up there in age. One of them was injured. They have up-and-comers. I think Emeka Egbuka goes and joins up with Baker Mayfield and goes to Tampa Bay. And I think he's a receiver that's really slid under the radar. I honestly think that he should be mocked a lot higher than he is. He had a tremendous career at Ohio State. They don't win the national championship without Emeka Egbuka and what he's been able to do for the Buckeyes. Really consistent receiver. I think that's the best trait with him: consistency. Doesn't drop balls, runs really good routes, plays hard, cares about it. He's an impeccable wide receiver, and wherever he goes, I think he could be a guy that has kind of a Terry McLaurin type career where, and he was still big at Ohio State, but he was never the feature number one guy. I think he could go in the NFL and he could be huge. I think he could really have a great career in the NFL if everything works out. Denver, this is a Tyler Warren spot, and I know it's late for Tyler Warren, but you have to understand he's a tight end, and tight ends have never been overvalued in the draft. They never go that early. Look at Brock Bowers last year. He slid a bit, didn't go as early as people thought. I saw some mocks that had him going to the Jets early. They're not picking him that early. He is going to be a really talented. He reminds me of Brock Bowers a little bit, and I think he'll have a great first year, a Brock Bowers type first year, especially if he goes to Denver with Sean Payton, all the things that he can do. I'm seeing it now. Him and Bo Nix clicking. I'm seeing it now. But I think that he's definitely going to go inside 20, but this would be probably the perfect landing spot for him. Pittsburgh, they're going to go receiver of some point here. I think they would have loved if Emeka Egbuka would have slid here, which he still possibly could come draft time. But Luther Burton, he had a good career at Missouri. I think he can be a solid player for him. Then you go to the Chargers. You have Harbaugh drafting. Why not get his former player in Loveland, who was the best offensive piece for the Michigan team last year? So that's just the type of pick that looks like it's going to work. Now, I don't think Loveland is on the same level as Warren at all in terms of tight end ability, but I think he can carve out a pretty solid career, especially if he goes to the Chargers to team up with Justin Herbert. Green Bay, I think, will go corner Benjamin Morrison. They have an act for developing young corners, and I think that they could use somebody on the secondary. Minnesota is interesting, but I think that if you're them, you continue to improve your O-line. You get an interior guy in Booker. I think that will be a solid pick for them. Then you go to the Texans, and I think that at this point you go O-lineman, and I think they will take Josh Connerly Jr. You have to go O-lineman. That O-line for the Texans began to crumble last year. It did. It just began to crumble. It wasn't working out well, and they needed a boost, and this will be the boost they need. Rams is an interesting spot, but I could see them going with a young defensive player. You have Revel Jr. Now, I usually sway away from drafting players from smaller schools like in East Carolina, but this guy has really good tape. He showed he was the real deal, and I think he could be a solid cornerback prospect. If you look at the Eagles, the guy that they drafted, I believe Mitchell, that they drafted from Toledo, he's having a phenomenal season. So if you can diagnose the tape, if they're grown up in the room, then it can definitely work. Baltimore, I think they got to improve on defense as well. I think this is definitely a spot. And we're going to go to Jack Sawyer. This looks like a Baltimore pick to me. I don't know why he's not higher up there. I just think that this is a guy that's going to go. He was such a huge part of that Ohio State national championship team. He's a great player. I think he's going to be really good in the NFL. And I like him to go here. I think that Baltimore would fit him, stay in the AFC North. I think it would make a lot of sense, and that's why I would put him here. Detroit, you could do all kinds of things with Detroit. Obviously, they're at a point right now where if everybody comes back healthy, they're drafting for depth. And I think at this point you would just take best available. Walter Nolan, really solid D lineman. This will add more depth. There's going to be injuries that occur. And now if you have a situation where Hutchinson or if somebody on the front line were to go down, now you have more depth, and that's why I would take this pick. Washington, they could go all sort of directions with this, and I think they will go O-lineman in this spot. Ezra, you want to protect Jaden Daniels at this point. Get him a good offensive tackle. Make sure that he stays good, and I like this pick for him. The Bills, I think that they would probably improve on defense. If you really look at it for the Bills, their defense was not that great this past year, and I think it was kind of their Achilles heel towards the end. They just weren't able to make proper stops. I like Tyleik Williams, but I don't know. I think they need a corner. I think they need more corner. Elam isn't cutting it, and I think that you got to go corner. Barron, this is a solid pick right here. Philadelphia is another team where whoever they draft, it's going to be drafting for depth. Can't really go wrong with getting a guy like Tyleik Williams in this spot. This would be a great pick. That would be definitely a great pick for them. You improve your defense even more. Their offense really doesn't need anything else. So I think that would be good. And then Kansas City, I like them to go offensive tackle. And that's going to do it for Mock Draft 2.0 of the first round. And yeah, comment below. Let me know how you thought. 3.0 will be out next week. And yeah.